Welcome to all our Absa clients and colleagues, and thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Paul Fenwick. I'm part of the FX Markets team at Absa, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Kgotso Radira, one of our senior economists within the group. Kgotso, welcome and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Paul, for the invitation.
Great. So we want to talk about the medium-term budget speech coming up in October this year. But before we kind of get into there, maybe for our viewers, you can just set the scene as to where is the economy currently? What is the state of our country currently?
Well, Paul, firstly, I think the lack of sustained economic growth is sort of the biggest macro or socio-economic challenge that South Africa is facing. As you know, that growth in the first quarter contracted by 3.1%, the worst number in 10 years. But also in the second quarter, we had some recovery where it grew by 3.1%. 7 of the 10 sectors recorded some growth, which is quite positive, but the growth environment remains quite weak. Perhaps as we think about long-term second half of the year and beyond, the big concern is the weak business confidence that is going to weigh on sentiment, but also is likely to weigh on growth going forward.
Okay. So given where we are, and obviously with a lot of headlines being dominated by very negative sentiment, what is the kind of tone and indicators you're expecting out of the speech in October?
Well, out of the speech, I think the first point is growth is a lot weaker, but also this year we've had inflation being a lot weaker than what was presented in the budget. So which means then revenue collections are likely to be, the projections will be a lot weaker than what was presented in the budget. But also what we would be looking at is what government does to cut back on spending, right? Because that's the only lever that government can pull in an environment where revenue is under pressure. But on the expenditure side, I think that will be the big focus. Again, as we know that government has announced that provinces and even national departments need to cut spending by 5% and 6% over the next 2 fiscal years. That would be the big focus. But it's likely that we are going to also see a budget deficit that is a lot worse than what was presented at the start of the year, closer to about 6.1%, which is our forecast, but also versus the 4.7% that was presented at the start of the year.
And what's the kind of sentiment around these state-owned enterprises? What are you expecting to come out of the speech around the management of those going forward?
I think a lot of great strides have been made over the past year and a half in terms of one, stabilizing the boards, but also trying to fix the finances. I think everybody's waiting for details on Eskom around how is Eskom going to be sort of unbundled, and also sort of a sustainable business model, because Eskom is one of the biggest risks to the fiscus, but also to the economy. I think that will be the big focus. But also all the other state enterprises, that will be a greater focus on what are the plans over the coming a year or two from the government.
Okay. And, given all the focal points, we've got the current Moody's rating, which is a hot topic right now. It still has us set at investment grade, however, with very negative outlook, while the other 2 major houses, S&P and Fitch, have already downgraded us. What do you expect going forward? Do you think Moody's will come in line with the other 2, or do you think we'll retain our investment grade status?
Moody's has announced last week that they are going to keep the rating unchanged. The expectation perhaps could be that they'll be waiting for the mini budget on the 23rd of October to announce that decision. We expect, our house view was that they are going to change perhaps the outlook from stable to negative, and perhaps that is still quite likely if perhaps the MTBP is a lot worse than what they are already expecting. But from the statements they've issued, it's clear that perhaps they still are not ready to downgrade South Africa yet.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, Kgotso. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.